All right, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Employee Relations and Public Safety Committee, the ERPS Committee. Joined by myself, Commissioner Bradshaw and Rader on the committee, and then Commissioner Cochran-Johnson. And then I can't see everybody, got it on video only, so if anyone else pops in, we'll recognize them. So we have got a pretty long agenda today, so let's just jump right into it. We'll start with our meeting minutes from the June 21st meeting. And if there's any changes or edits, if not, we'll go and take a motion for that.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right. Motion and second. Seeing no discussion, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 All right, chair votes aye, motion carries. All right, so we're going to come back to the employee clinic and the public safety report once we get through some of these agenda items. So let's just start first with our, okay, I'm pretty sure I've got the most up-to-date agenda here, but item 1791, I think is that what y'all got? Okay. All right, so we got a change order number 1 to contract number 1218886 for self-contained breathing apparatus, purchase, repair, and maintenance. Annual contract with 4 options to renew for use by fire rescue. This contract consists of purchase, repair, maintenance, and management of the county's, I think that's SCUBA is how you pronounce that acronym, awarded to Municipal Emergency Services, MES, amount not to exceed $30,000. And Chief Fulham, go right ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Chair, and to the commissioners. As you stated, this is for a 2-month extension to this contract. We are currently speaking to the vendor about updating their pricing so that we can go into a full extension of the contract, but we're asking here just for 2 months, that $30,000, and that is for the SCBAs. As you stated, these are what the firefighters use to have breathable air in a hazardous condition. So SCBAs is what they are.
Okay, so it's not SCUBA.
Not SCUBA.
Okay, Zach, you said SCUBA this morning, so I'm just going to say I just parroting what Zach said. So, that SCUBA is only for Diane McNabb.
I was correcting without correcting, Commissioner.
I just didn't want to get it wrong. Okay, all right. So SCBA, although we're all dreaming about scuba diving.
It's one letter. It's actually one letter different. The C is U when it's for underwater.
Got it. Okay. All right. Very good. That's very important. Some, I guess, some are designed for underwater and others are not.
Yes, correct.
Okay, good. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion on this item.
I did have one question.
Yes.
Chief Fulham, you indicated that you were asking for updated pricing. Is this a sole source?
This is not a sole source, Commissioner, but there is very limited vendors that can provide this type of service for the equipment.
Okay, but I mean, when y'all go out for, I mean, this is only for 2 months. Do you anticipate a full request for proposal or invitation to bid on it?
No, what we're asking them for is the updated pricing. We do know that the pricing has gone up for the equipment when they do replace the equipment. So we're just asking for updated pricing.
Okay, but I mean, what is the term of this contract in terms of, this is a change order? Is this at the end of the contract, I guess is my question.
The contract expires at the end of this month, July 31st. So
Right.
we would be going into asking, for a full extension, or excuse me, a full renewal.
Okay, so is this a contract? This is the first renewal option. And the contract itself has 4 options to renew. So it can go 4 years forward, but the contract does not include a set price or a set escalator for the 4 years. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Commissioner, is that it doesn't have a set pricing for the years. And I see Ms. Horner's coming on, so she can correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Horner. Director Horner.
Okay, it does not have a set
pricing, but it is an on-call contract, and our on-call contracts do have escalation clauses in them which allow the vendor to ask us for a price increase should their cost increase. And in order for that to be acceptable, it has to be acceptable by the user department, and they have to provide evidence that the prices have gone up, such as current invoices versus prior invoices, and also maybe any industry standard information that's available.
But that's not what we're looking for now. What we're looking for is just a extension at existing prices.
It is, because there has been a price increase, and it's my understanding that Fire Rescue wanted to move forward with the current pricing on the renewal. It basically is the same thing as the vendor moving forward with a request for price increase.
Okay, so in 2 months, we will be presented with the price increase that the vendor would be entitled to offer, consistent with the contract. Is that right?
That is correct.
And then we'd have another decision to make as to whether or not to accept that price increase if it were consistent with the contract terms.
That is correct, Commissioner.
Thank you. That was my question.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Rader. All right, seeing no other hands, I'll call for the motion.
Move to recommend approval.
Second.
All right, motion is second. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. All right, item number 1779 is change order number 5 to contract number 1010560 for computer-aided dispatch CAD system multi-year. For use by police services, this contract consists of providing an enhanced CAD system for receiving and responding to the county's emergency E911 calls, awarded to Central Square, formerly Tritech Software Systems, amount not to exceed $142,706.83. And this is for police services. Who would like to speak on this item?
And if you'd like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature or pop your video on and we'll get you recognized.
Looks like police services or, yeah, there you go. Hey, Chief, thanks. Go right ahead.
Yes, I would, I believe Assistant Chief Ivanoff is on. Chief Ivanoff.
Okay, yep, there he is. Yes, go right ahead, Assistant Chief Ivanoff.
Yes, sir. This really isn't my item. This is an E911 item. We don't monitor this.
Gotcha. Okay, this is an E9. Okay, so it's just police services, but E911 specific. Okay. Mr. Williams, is there anything else to add to this?
No, well, there's just nothing, but if you like, if you give me a moment, we can maybe get Director Guest on. I don't know if she missed it, but it was here. And Director Lumpkin, you want to add anything, or should we get Director?
I will get her on, just.
If we can table it. Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yeah, okay, we can come back to this one. Okay, so Commissioners, do we need to table this or should we just come back to it?
You can come back to it.
Just come back to it, okay. Okay, great, thank you. All right, so let's pick up our previously heard items. So first one is 1299, and that is the resolution we've been working on the last several weeks here in committee on the mandatory use of video surveillance systems at convenience stores and related businesses. So believe Attorney Terry Phillips and then Commissioner Cochran Johnson, I will ask if y'all have any additional, I guess, updates that we should be talking about here in committee and see where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do believe that Mr. Phillips is with us, so I will allow him to recap where we are, the work that has been complete. I do believe that every issue that has been raised has been addressed. So at this time, if I might, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Phillips, I would ask you to respond and take questions.
Great, thank you,
Yeah,
Mr. Phillips. Yes, please, thank you.
So based on our last discussion, commissioners, we went through and made a few tweaks. I have sent you a copy of it, and I will just talk through the changes for efficiency. If you look on page 5, you will find in section E, a shared space provision. You may recall there was a question of what happens where a business shares the exterior. What you described, I think, can fairly fit the normal strip mall scenario where there are multiple businesses, one large parking space. So we added a provision that outlines how that would be addressed where you have a convenience store or a monitored business. The standards and requirements relative to the shared exterior space for those businesses will be modified by the director to account for the shared space and the need for placement of cameras on the exterior of the business itself. In other words, commissioners, what would happen is the director of planning, in going through how the system should work for a store in a scenario like that, will tell the store about where they should place their cameras outside the store and what would be reasonable for them to try to capture. It's just different where a store has an independent exterior space that they fully control, and those provisions are spelled out. So where there's a shared space, there'd be that adjustment with the director. The next piece that we changed, there was a need for addressing grandfathering, and the request I understood from this committee was that grandfathering be addressed expressly. Now, the provisions of the ordinance already called for a renewal periodically, such that the renewal would happen on May 1st of a given year. So we've written in express grandfathering so that where you're grandfathered, there's a blank line to say how much time would be given from the May 1st of the year to bring the system into compliance. In other words, where you're grandfathered, you may give an extended period of time to make sure you're not asking a store owner to update their system too frequently. And you can put in that space whatever time you think is appropriate. Commissioners will gladly write it however you want it. The last significant change was where a store has a change in location. If a store changes its physical location, there's now an express provision that would outline what happens. A business that is relocating shall have to meet the terms for all of this, and the business shall continue to comply with the requirements at any subsequent location if they're a monitored business. Obviously, the way this ordinance is crafted, convenience stores must comply. So a convenience store that moves would obviously have to comply if they were going to continue functioning as a convenience store in another location. Where you have a slight nuance is if a monitored business were within the period where they had to function as a monitored business and they elected to move. So now you have this express provision that says they will continue to comply with the requirements as a monitored business, and the same ways that they would be able to change meeting those requirements or avoid having to continue to meet them would be addressed at the new location as well. But the timing would not change simply because the business changed the physical location that they were occupying. And the one caveat that's not written in this provision that is inherent to it, obviously a business that moves outside the jurisdiction of this ordinance would not be required to comply with the ordinance. A very light but obvious example, a store that moved outside of DeKalb County to some other area would not be required to comply. Those are the changes. They're all written out. I gave you both a marked changes for easy review where you could see those changes, as well as a clean copy. Some of us like to read it clean without markings on it. And of course, if there's anything I can do to assist with any questions or further discussion, I'll be happy to do that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Yes, let's start with Commissioner Bradshaw and then Commissioner Cochran-Johnson.
Yes, thank you for the updated info. Quick question, does the ordinance apply to just unincorporated DeKalb County, or will the municipalities be fall under this as well?
It's unincorporated DeKalb.
Great, only.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Cochran-Johnson.
Yes, that was a great question, Commissioner. I have had conversation with at least 3 municipalities who have requested the legislation because they are considering. However, of course, Attorney Phillips is correct. It only addresses unincorporated DeKalb. One thing that I would like to ask at the pleasure of the committee is that we consider one friendly amendment. I took the time to read through the entire legislation at this point because, of course, it has evolved. And one of the conversations that we had here in committee, during which time we had Chief Ramos come, and she specifically expressed a desire to have this legislation grow, meaning allow it to fight crime in real time. So during that conversation, there's two different programs. One is FUSIS that was discussed, and the other is Project Green Light that is taking place in Detroit. And it allows for real-time crime fighting through real-time monitoring if local police and authorities deem the necessity to do so. And I do believe we will be there one day. And I think that we can prepare ourselves now by creating legislation that would allow our local officers to access a location with probable cause or the desire to fight crime in real time through the monitoring system. So I would just assume we add that now as come back later. But again, if the committee so desires to have additional conversation, or perhaps Chief Ramos is on the call, we can do so. But I do think that that's going to be a necessary element of this type of ordinance.
Gotcha.
And I yield back to you, Commissioner Terry.
Thank you, Commissioner. And then just to maybe, can you, and maybe between you and Commissioner or Attorney Phillips, so would this be added to the minimum standard section? What area are you thinking this would be included in?
Well, I would leave, if I might, Mr. Chair, I would leave that to Attorney Phillips. It would just give the right, if deemed necessary and appropriate, to do real-time monitoring by the police department. Now, Project Greenlight that's taking place in Detroit, it charges a fee, and that is something that could be discussed at a later date. I just think it's necessary to have the ability, but they charge an additional fee, and businesses that participate in their Greenlight program automatically receives almost a seal of approval or safety. It also, with their program, it requires on-site visits during certain intervals throughout the day to ensure a safe environment. So there's several different factors, and I will send that all over to you all for consideration, because I'm not trying to create an ordinance within an ordinance that would do those things, but just so that you understand what's taking place out there in the marketplace as it relates to fighting crime and giving officers the ability to do remote monitoring if they so see fit at locations, with the right technology, of course, being in place.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks for that clarification. Mr. Phillips, what are your thoughts in terms of this sort of reference to a specific sort of system in the ordinance?
Commissioners, I'll gladly look at whatever any of you ask me to review with respect to this until I review what Commissioner Cochran-Johnson will be sending out. I don't know that it'd be appropriate to comment. What I will offer to you at this point, though, just in terms of what's in front of us currently, if we look at Section D, minimum technological standards, they start on page 4 and they bleed over into page 5. On page 5, number 8 towards the top of the page, you have a requirement that digital video recording must be made available to the chief, meaning the chief of police, or any other peace officer for viewing as soon as possible, but not later than 72 hours after being requested. And that is a space where a maximum of 72 hours is allowed for providing the video. But obviously, as soon as possible is an encouragement that businesses would work to make the video and corresponding audio available as soon as possible. There are devices and systems available in the private sector that would allow companies to share their feed in real time. And this provision makes that shared feed in real time compatible with what you're already proposing based on the ordinance in front of you. If additional changes were needed based on what Commissioner Cochran-Johnson is going to share, I'll gladly discuss that with her, and I trust she'll have Chief Ramos and the public safety folks opine on what they think of it, and we'll make any necessary adjustments. But for today, the notion of having real-time feed is covered inherently in putting a maximum of 72 hours in and encouraging as soon as possible shared feed of the video and audio.
Understood. Gotcha. And so, and maybe Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, do you think that sort of that section, section D, number 8, maybe as we get more information and sort of feedback on the green light system, in theory, we could just amend that section to include more specific requirements if that's the route we were going. But did you want to try to incorporate that now, or did you want to try to come back to it maybe a little bit later as a, actually just changing it when we get more information, assuming we're going to pass this sooner?
Understood. And I think in order not to muddy the waters, so to speak, I will listen to the committee as well as fellow commissioners. And if we're comfortable with what we have, I would say let's move it along because it's important legislation. And Attorney Phillips is absolutely correct. This ordinance unifies the equipment, but it falls short of giving us the expressed ability to remotely monitor locations. So I think that probably will require more conversation, and I'll put together a nice packet and send it over to everyone so that we can begin that conversation. And if it so pleases the Board of Commissioners, once you've had the opportunity, we can very easily go back and make the amendment so that when we reach that point, because I know that we will, seeing what's happening in other municipalities, and I will even share with you all a video that takes you through what that program in Detroit looks like. What frightens me with those types of programs is it requires a fee, a monthly fee. And I believe that everyone has the right to be safe and secure, and that there should be no fee for safety. So their program has brought a lot of, a lot of conversation. However, with us, building in that ability for the future just gives us the opportunity to expand. But I'll remove the friendly amendment pending the dissemination of information for everyone to digest. And at the appropriate time, I will come back to committee.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. I saw Commissioner Larry Johnson and then Commissioner Rader.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions for Mr. Phillips. I heard you just say the Director of Planning will be in charge of positioning the cameras, or did I hear you correctly?
You did hear me correctly, Commissioner. The way this is crafted, the cameras have to be placed to cover certain things. And what I was describing is an amendment made based on your previous discussion where businesses have a shared space. In those instances, the Director of Planning would make an adjustment and tell the business based on the case-by-case analysis of a given business and the exterior that they share with other businesses, how the cameras have to be placed for the exterior. The interior requirements would remain the same. The front door requirements, the back door requirements, and the like would all remain the same, as well as the camera features having to be able to film in the absence of light. All of those other requirements would remain the same. It's just that shared parking lot and what.
Right. Okay, my question is, since our director is not an expert in security, what put the decision-making in planning, because that's under, why didn't it stay up under the experts who do security or who know public safety? What made you put it up under there?
Just because of the way the inspections would be done and the way the pieces would be done based on the ownership and use of shared space. It was less an issue of security
Mhm.
or public safety alone as it was, what is the space controlled by the store owner and where can they put cameras and what could be captured based on what they control there.
So when he wouldn't be liable once he say this camera will be the best place for it, or will a store owner still be liable? Will the county be liable, or both?
Well, I don't know that the county's buying liability here. The county's saying we're requiring you to have the video surveillance. And it
Right,
is
I'm just saying,
security measure
when
only.
the way you position the camera is for safety's sake. And if he positioned in the wrong position based on the owner saying the county told me to put it there, but we miss a spot or not part of the spot that was needed, will we be liable? Is what I'm asking.
I couldn't tell you what a court would say, obviously, Commissioner, but what I am comfortable telling you today
Mhm.
is that where the ordinance as crafted requires cameras to cover certain parts of a parking lot, if the owner doesn't own it and can't put those cameras out there because they don't own it and it's a shared space, then the only decision that our planning director would be making in that circumstance is making an assessment of what they own, what that individual store owner owns in the way of the storefront, the awning and the like, and giving some informed information about where they can place the cameras there to capture as much of that parking lot as would be reasonable under that store's circumstance. So
Right.
I don't think there would be any liability there.
Okay.
It's actually allowing them to just take into account the fact that they share the space and they have limits that they would not have if they owned all of the parking lot or rented all of the parking lot just for their business, which is what I understood this committee wanted addressed expressly.
The next question is, how many convenience stores will be impacted by this ordinance, and how many already have cameras and will need an upgraded camera system?
If you're directing that to me, Commissioner, I have not researched the statistics. I would defer to our public safety folks on the statistics behind this ordinance.
Or the planning people have, how many convenience stores will be impacted by this ordinance, and how many have cameras already, and then how many will need upgraded cameras? I guess that's three different things. Just something I wanted to have and to know. Let me ask my next. Well, you want to ask? I don't know if you have the answer. Just something you can get to me. I know it may not be answered now. Other question is there a timeline in here for businesses to get the equipment? If they don't get in their timeline, what's the penalty?
Yes, there is a timetable for getting it. And generally what you will find is there's two different scenarios. And I'll put my glasses on and see if I can specify where that is for you.
First.
The initial building of a space for a convenience store would require an inspection so that as they open up, they're able to include the required video surveillance. But obviously in adopting this, much like your first question, Commissioner, there are those stores that exist now.
Right.
There's some timing here, and if you would give me a second, I will find it, for making sure that the video surveillance equipment is up to standard in a timely fashion, and if necessary, improve to comply with the requirements here.
And that's going to require the inspector to go out.
That's right.
And see if the equipment that a store currently has will be updated. So they first have to go out there and look at all of the stores. And then come back and say, this is the standards you have to get and upgrade to those standards.
If you look at the effective date in section K, prior to the effect, all convenience stores that have systems prior to the effective date of the ordinance shall ensure their systems are in full compliance with this section and article, and obtain written assessment approval from the county by, and then there's a blank line, where the commission will determine how much time they want to give those stores that you're referencing to get their system up to speed.
And the system that we're asking them to buy. And I know a lot of systems have to be updated yearly or every 2 years. You know how often we have to get the inspector has to go like every 2 years to look at it because of the upgraded systems, or will we just require one system and then when upgrades happen, we will ask the business to modify?
That really covers two different sections here. The initial inspections will have to be done, and that's the section I just pointed out.
Right.
And then what we spoke about is one of the changes, the notion of grandfathering, which is the section G on page 5 that I spoke about earlier. There's a blank line on how long you would give. Now, what is required that is consistent with all of that is every 3 years, the county staff will determine if the video surveillance requirements need to be upgraded. It doesn't mean they will upgrade them, but the decision was made with input from your technology experts, Mr. Metelsky and his team, public safety and planning, that every 3 years or so they should go and look. So the 3-year timetable was written in, and that's the May 1st upgrades to the extent any changes are made. They're not mandated, but at least every 3 years they'll review it and make that decision again.
Next question. At the certain amount of incidents, based on the legislation, is there something that can trigger a physical security guard to be located there, since the cameras, what I've seen a lot of the shootings and the things that have happened, I've seen the stations have cameras already. So it didn't stop the actual incident from happening. What do you do once you have the upgraded cameras and all of that? Is there a certain amount of times then you have to have a physical security person there?
Well, there's nothing in this ordinance that prevents a store from taking the measure of also having a security officer. But there's nothing in this ordinance that requires a security officer. Instead, the way it's crafted, the video surveillance must be in place. The requirements for it are all spelled out and we've discussed it. And then there is an enforcement provision where failure to have those things and maintain them as required here could result in being found guilty of violating the ordinance and getting a fine and the like.
Okay, yeah, just make sure planning, someone give me how many stores will be required to have it and how many stores have cameras. I don't know if we don't probably check that out on the form at all. Well, I think we need to add that to the form, period. But I also want this to look at Mr. Baker, especially you and CO Williams. We had created a business license component where at the certain amount of incidents already, public safety related, that those businesses had to be called in and shown up and give us a plan, a security plan on how they're going to work on the prevention of those incidents from happening. So I don't know whatever happened to that. And I don't know how you're going to implement all of these things up under the planning department, which I know Mr. Baker going to say, yes, he can do it, but it's just a lot. But I know it'll probably become up under planning and economic development for us to monitor this. So I look forward to looking at the implementation and process as we move forward. So we won't I don't want to give a false hope around the cameras is going to be the panacea for the incidents to stop. But I also would like to have a trigger in there, Madam Chair, at some point, a physical security guard at the certain amount of incident. I'm not talking about just a homicide, but I don't know if it's listed on robbery or theft or fighting at these locations. And I know what's drawing us to do this because of the homicides, but there's other things that lead to homicides, like the robberies, the fights, other things may precipitate us having a trigger or something in there for a physical security person. But if that's something we can do at a different day, that's fine. But just, I know we talked about the green light. It's something we may want to do in the future as we move forward. But this is something that's on the right track. So we just need to, I want to look at some of those enhancements and making sure that we have the staffing ability to monitor this. When we having problems now with people just trying to get a business license. I go to a lot of businesses, a lot of the business licenses are outdated because they're waiting on them to get them to come in. So I just want to make sure we have the capacity to do this as well. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rader, and then Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, and then Commissioner Bradshaw.
Could I just return to the change in location section? So the way that you've written it basically does not, differentiate between those that change location. But I want to return to sort of my example of a laundromat located next to a liquor store, and that the laundromat ends up being the place where perhaps people loiter. Ends up being a problem with that, and as a consequence, they end up being a regulated business. If that laundromat were to move away from the liquor store, it's likely that that particular relationship would no longer exist, and perhaps they would not be under such scrutiny at that point. Is there any means by which the circumstances of a particular business related to these sort of contributory effects could be incorporated into the provision so that, this basically just says that if you change locations, it doesn't really matter. And I'm just wondering if there's any other means that either the police department or someone else could look at those combination of situations and say, well, if you are a laundromat that moves away from your nuisance, so to speak, that you can go without.
I think I understand what you're describing, Commissioner, and what I'd offer in response is the short answer is no. It's not crafted currently. There may be a way to do it, but it's not crafted currently to.
Yeah, no, I know it's not.
It's not crafted to address multiple businesses at once. And what you do have instead that I think facilitates what you're describing is, I'll direct you back to Section G. A monitored business that is in fact a laundromat that finds itself being monitored because of criminal activity that took place that warranted having the requirements imposed on them as a monitored business, then moves and realizes a change in location changes their circumstance where they may feel they don't need it anymore. There are blank lines in how long they would have to function without having the requisite criminal activity or other actions that would warrant them keeping their status as a monitored business. As long as they were able to achieve that, the way this is crafted, they would no longer have the requirement of meeting the video surveillance ordinance because they're a laundromat. And the same
obviously, what I'm trying to avoid is the expense of the new system in the new location. And that really wouldn't speak to that. You would have to install the new system in the new location until such time as your, and is it G? I don't know that it's
It's now section, the lettering changed because of added sections. It's J, as in John. It's That's now this. It's an older section, but
Right.
the lettering changed because we added some. So if you're looking at the new version,
No, I am.
June 29th, it's J, monitored business.
Right. So is there any means by which, they can have a grace period after they've relocated before they have to go to the expense of the new equipment?
We can craft it that way if that's the will of.
I'm not, I'm just, again, I'm trying to deal with the situation where the monitored activity, the monitored business activity is alleviated by a change in location.
Again, we've not crafted it that way. We could if you chose to.
I would
The
like to
idea
hear
was
from- Yeah.
the idea was, as I understood our last discussion, once that system is purchased and the store meets the requirements, if they move, they would not use a physical move just to change it. We just expressly addressed how the requirements would be carried out. And we didn't change requirements, we just expressly addressed it. If you now want this crafted so that a physical move would give a grace period to a monitored business to see if they in fact needed to be monitored going forward, given they're in a new location, we can address that. I'll craft it however you guys want.
I mean, if it were me, I might give them one strike and you're out type of a opportunity, but you know, I'd certainly yield to both the sponsor as well as others in terms of that particular sensitivity.
Commissioner Cochran-Johnson is next.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. You know, to Commissioner Rader, I would say that if you are a gas station or convenience store, and I've sent along the data that was pulled to show that they, along with our apartment communities, have the highest incidence of violent crime in DeKalb County, making up collectively over 70% of what we experience. There is no quote unquote grace period. If we are passing this ordinance, it affects every gas and service station in DeKalb County.
And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking those that are monitored because of the incidents of on-site issues that would not otherwise be mandatory monitoring.
Okay, and now with that being said, I understand what you're saying in a different way. If a business moves that had, and we remove the term high risk because of the concern of the use of such terminology, but if there is a business that moves that had previously at one location been deemed to be, and for lack of better words, I will say high risk, I'll leave that up to the ERPS committee as to whether or not there is an automatic trigger to continue monitoring at a new location, or if they come off the radar and upon, you know, the incidents are clearly laid out within the ordinance that would trigger a mandatory surveillance. So I have no preference there one way or another. I leave that to the will of the committee.
All right, and then just to continue that, what I would suggest is that if the business in their new location has no calls for police services within their, what are we calling it? The period in section J.
I assume you're referring to the recalls within a 30-day period, and or as it's spelled out in the ordinance, that would include, in addition to those particular provisions, any business where there is a murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping, armed robbery, rape, child molestation, aggravated sodomy, aggravated battery, or any felony possession or possession with the intent to distribute controlled substances. Any of those would be triggers as well.
Right, and so in the second line of section J under monitored business, it says the license holder shall retain the designation until it provides documentation to the chief that a period of time has passed without 3 or more calls for police services. And no crime has been reported. So all I'm saying is that perhaps we could insert a one strike and you're out provision for those businesses that are regulated because they have become monitored businesses in their new location, that if they have any violation, then they'll have to install the equipment and then try to burn it off again through lack of violation.
If I can make a suggestion, Commissioner Rader.
Please do.
I think I understand what you're describing, and we really don't have a title for it, but it is the period that a monitored business must comply with the ordinance that you're trying to address where the business has made a physical move to a new location
Mhm.
and having a grace period. The thing to consider for the committee, I'm just trying to be helpful, there are two different components to consider. The first one is whether or not there have been 3 calls or more to the police in a set period of time. And then the second time period, and you'll notice in that provision, Commissioner, there are 2 different blank lines for 2 different time periods. How long before one of the crimes listed in the section Commissioner Cochran Johnson read from, how long without having any of those crimes committed again? So perhaps what you're suggesting would allow the business to get out from under the monitored business if they don't have the calls, or both if they don't have the calls or the crime, but just recognize if they have the crime, they're not getting out from under it anyway, but you would give them the grace period. It would only be one time to commit a serious crime and the clock starts again, but you would be giving them a grace period, giving they're in a new location. That's what I hear you describing. They would go back, and if they had any of that happen, then they would have to start over, because that frankly would put any business, whether they'd ever had the monitored business label or not, that would put any business in a position where they needed to comply if the chief designated them as a monitored business because of the 3 calls in a time period or because of one of those crimes being committed at the establishment. So given the grace period would say, we're letting you off the hook, but we will impose it again if your business has the same circumstance again. That's really what you're describing.
Yes, and I'm just simply trying to make it so that if they move locations, they don't have to incur the additional expense of a new system if in fact the previous location was the primary factor that drove them into the monitored situation. So
I gotcha. I hear you. Yeah, and I think maybe just to kind of see if we can close the loop on that discussion, because I think that, you know, part of this section J, the monitored business. So, you know, part of the, I think the sort of the equation here is that if a business, was required to install the new surveillance systems under these new standards, and then they did go a period of time without any incidents, I think we still have a blank there. So we need to kind of fill in sort of what we think that time period is. It does kind of, at the practicality ask, would a business literally uninstall, thousands of dollars of equipment maybe, or would they not? So I think that's kind of it's maybe a more practicality question. But I mean, I think Commissioner Rader, the only thing I would pause on is if a business did move and we made the bar for their new location to be lower than what the ordinance already is, then it might kind of create sort of, treating 2 different businesses differently, when I think we're trying to give them sort of a restart if they move to a different location. So instead of that, you're suggesting a 1 strike, you're out, but the original ordinance would still apply for the new business location.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against, making it tough or, giving them the same standard. They've already exhibited that they have a problem by becoming a monitored business. They are suggesting that, or they would be suggesting that because they're in the new location, they no longer have conditions that would make them a monitored business. But if they continue to have problems, then they need to remain a monitored business. But, I mean, I don't want to spend a great deal of time on it. I'm not sure that this is a widespread condition.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Yeah. We're getting more technical and more detailed for the what ifs, but I think that's a good exercise to go through and talk that out. Commissioner Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick things. I wanted just to confirm that all expenses for both the purchase and deployment of the video surveillance cameras is borne by the owner of the establishment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And then, Mr. Phillips, the copy dated 6/29, that's the most up-to-date version, correct?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay, I'll call the attention then to item L, enforcement penalties, violations and penalties. First sentence, the provisions of this ordinance may be enforced by any county employee. Am I reading that correctly?
You are. I would just caution you that the term county employee is defined
Okay,
earlier in the ordinance.
Okay.
So it's not the generic anyone who works for DeKalb.
okay.
If you look back to page 2,
Mhm.
you'll see the term county employee defined.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's a great catch. I was wondering that as well. I appreciate that clarification. Commissioner Cochran Johnson.
Yes, I just wanted to say to Commissioner Bradshaw, and well, the Commissioner Rader is the one who raised this particular question, that if a business should move and they're not a gas or service station, at the new location, I would believe that the ordinance should just begin to move forward, and they're still under the same county requirements. So if there is an incident, one of the incidents of violent crime, or of course the sale or possession of a controlled substance, or 3 different calls for servicing, then immediately it would just kick back in at the new location. And that way a new business doesn't carry along any baggage from a previous location, but the ordinance will take care of itself over time. So I'm not sure. And I'm sorry.
I would support that particular framework, but that's not the way that it currently works. You carry your baggage with you, so to speak.
I'll allow Attorney Phillips to address that.
I understand it as Commissioner Rader is describing it. And we spent a lot of time discussing monitored business and how long that designation would stay, when really what he's asking about is in section H rather, as in help, change of location. That is where that's a new provision, new to this draft. And that is where the monitored business has to continue. So it may be helpful, Commissioner, if you go back to J as in John, the monitored business section, and identify how much time you're referencing. And that may help you make an informed decision of whether or not you should be concerned that moving to a new location should start the business over that is monitored. If it's a short period of time, you may not find that necessary. Obviously, if it's a longer period of time, you may think it's an important part. But it could be helpful to fill those 2 blank lines.
Right. But my point is that if it carries over immediately to the new location, then in order to be able to move in, they're going to have to install the monitoring system. And so now they've incurred that expense. What I think I hear Commissioner Cochran Johnson say, and what I would support, is if they do take a new location, then they start again to establish their status as a monitored business. And if they continue to have problems, then they're going to have to reinstall, but that we're going to give them the benefit of the new location and make them reestablish that status, as opposed to them carrying it with them to the new location. Because again, as soon as they move, then they will have to reinstall a system and incur that expense.
I agree, but for clarity, Commissioner, just so everyone follows, what I hear you saying is we would change section H so that a change in location for a monitored business, that's the retail establishment that is not a convenience store, they would not bring the monitored business designation with them to the new location. However, if in the new location, the requisite things happened where they again acquired the designation because of what happened in the new location, then of course it would be imposed.
And they go back under, that's right.
Right. I'm just making sure that it's clear, because I followed your description, and it's a change to H, and it simply says a change in location will get you out of the monitored business designation, but you can reacquire it in your new location.
That's right.
Correct.
That's right.
I'll gladly make that change if that's the desire of the committee.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I'm following. Commissioner Bradshaw, are you good with that? That sounds good to me.
I got no qualms with that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Commissioner
Sorry
Terry.
to take so long in trying to get to that point.
No problem. Thanks for making the point, Commissioner Rader. So I'm sorry, Attorney Phillips, so you're going to rewrite the language of section H,
Correct.
and then at some point we'll be given an updated draft, correct?
Correct. That is a minor change, Commissioners. I can get that to you by next week. It's Tuesday. You'll have it by next week.
Okay.
What I would ask, though, because I do think it will help any further discussion, is if you could consider the amount of time that you want to place in. There are 4 blanks that need to be filled in. I just think that would be helpful, and it may be fruitful, at least in your next discussion.
Well, that's kind of scary because you're reading my mind because that's exactly what I was thinking. There are a few blanks in a few sections that I presume would need to be filled in before we're asked to take action.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and just let me ask a general question for the law department. Is there any, I know we have kind of like I feel like there one section that says 120 days, this ordinance will become effective. So is there a sort of a similar sort of desire? I mean, what's kind of a conservative lawyer's estimate of what a good window of time is for compliance that, is, reasonable without also it being so long that it is ineffective?
180 days, Commissioner. There are a number of factors. You'll have inspections. You're asking businesses to purchase systems and install them, et cetera, so forth. So off the cuff, just quickly, I'll give you 180 days.
Okay. All right. Let's all think about that time period as our fill in the blank when we get to that section, or I think let's go ahead and figure that out in the next 2 weeks. Okay. I wanted to sort of relay, I think, what Commissioner Larry Johnson was asking, because I think that would be helpful. So I think planning department can get us the list of all the convenience stores that we just have permits with, just how many number. And then I suppose police services could give us an estimate of what current convenience store locations could fall under this ordinance. Is that a fair assumption? Not an exact number, but an estimate. Maybe CO Williams can respond to that one.
One more time, in terms of the exact number of facilities?
Yeah, how many convenience stores we got just permitted in DeKalb County, unincorporated, and then how many do we think might actually fall under this ordinance?
So, yes, we could run that in terms of the business licensing and determine how many are permitted or are current, and then how many would fall under that. I guess we can reconcile that information as well. So you want that at the next meeting? Is that what you're saying?
Commissioner Cochran Johnson, is that a good request? Anything else you want to add to that?
I would just say that, in terms of the number, I have sent you the number of criminal incidents. However, all gas and service stations would be required to comply. So once we have the complete, accurate number, which I'm sure Mr. Baker, through, of course, we don't use SIC standard industry codes, but through whatever code system we call it here in DeKalb, that a business is required to submit under the category for which they operate. That's an easy find, but each and every gas and convenience store would be required to meet the requirements of the ordinance within the designated period of time, whether that's 180 days, whether it's 90 days, whether it's a year, whether we could have made it concurrent with the renewal of the business license, whatever the committee so chooses.
Okay. Sorry. I think and so because we added the monitored business if they're not a convenience store. So a monitored business would be required to implement these standards based on the police reporting.
Based on a demonstrated incidents of crime or violence. Correct.
Okay, good. All right. So just want to make sure everyone's clear there. So all convenience stores have to do this. And then if there's additional, I think we have it, it says retail establishment. and a retail establishment that is not a convenience store.
Yes.
And I do want to come back to that, and I'll recognize Director Baker here in a minute. So I wanted to come back to Attorney Phillips and from the law department's perspective. So the retail establishment, from y'all's sort of reading, a shopping center as a place where a lot of retail establishments exist, but a shopping center wouldn't be considered a retail establishment.
Correct.
It would just be the individual business within that shopping center.
That's what's compensated as it's drafted now. Yes, Commissioner.
Okay. Okay. Director Baker, you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to just simply respond to the question that was raised, and I can forward to you today. And that is, we have 151 active convenience stores that do sell gas. We have 85 convenience stores that do not sell gas. So we have a total of 236 establishments that we would call convenience stores currently.
Gotcha.
Mr. Cochran Johnson, I just sent you that list if that's.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for that. I was just sitting here adding the totals.
Okay, thank you. And then Director Baker, are package stores considered a separate designation?
A package store is a store that sells alcohol, meaning hard alcohol. So no, that's not in this designation.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right, so let's, I think we have a little bit more to work on here, but we're getting close here. So I did want to ask kind of just one question for the good of the whole is, do we want to consider a shopping center as a potential category as opposed to one retail establishment within the shopping center? And so I just posed that. We don't have to answer it now, but just if, where we're talking about with the current ordinance would, as we discussed, a business in a shopping center, they would have to provide out external from their sort of unit within that shopping center, but it wouldn't apply to the shopping center as an entity. I want to throw that out there. And then in terms of the law department's perspective on multifamily, is that something that we should tackle that as a separate issue?
Yes, Commissioner.
Is that right?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay, but we should tackle it though. Is this something we should just? There's no pathway forward, or is it something that we can explore further?
It's a completely separate discussion, Commissioner Terry.
Okay.
The ordinance before you today for video surveillance is directed solely at commercial establishments with a narrow focus on convenience stores and a little expansion based on criminal activity. So any discussion of residential use of video surveillance or anything like that would be a totally separate discussion.
Okay, gotcha. I don't want to mission creep too much, Commissioner Cochran Johnson. I know that we take your good idea and water it down, or turn it into something else. So I did want to just throw that out there because I think you're sparking good conversations that I think are all in the interest of improving public safety. Okay, so Attorney Phillips, you have a couple of changes you're going to make based on what we're talking about. We want to fill in a few of those blanks. I think we've got our hands around sort of the numbers of impacted stores. Is there anything else that we need in terms of research or further kind of explanation before we bring this back for kind of a final draft?
Under the blanks, I'd say, 5 years or 60 months. Is that too long?
Okay, you have to, what section was that again? Sorry.
J. I mean, that's probably pretty close to the lifespan of a monitoring system. So, once they got it, you're basically, there's no incremental expense as long as the system works. So you're looking at, how often are we going to redo standards, Mr. Phillips?
Every
3 years.
3 years.
Okay, well, maybe something between 3 and 5. I mean,
Okay.
You would like it so that you wouldn't, if you have managed to correct your problem, that you wouldn't have to upgrade to the new standard when that happens, but you're never going to have that exactly coincide. So I don't know, it might be that I would reverse that and maybe say 60 months for the new standard and 3 years for the for monitoring. And that way you'd have more of a chance to get out of the doghouse before you had a new standard thrust upon you.
That's a great point. Okay. All right, well, let's consider that as well. I think that makes sense to me for sounding, but let's come back to this. So commissioners, you want to table this for 2 more weeks? We can make these last little changes, and I think that pretty much covers a lot of the big questions. So I'll open the floor for a motion.
Motion to defer for 2 weeks.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right, chair votes aye. All right, let's come back to the item that we kind of tabled. We're gonna actually have to table it for real. So let's, item 1779, it's actually gonna be for fire services. So we'll just bring this back. You want to defer it for two weeks?
If I could, Mr. Chair, if we could hold in committee for 2 weeks.
Okay, all right. Floor is open for motion on that item.
Move to recommend deferral for 2 weeks.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right, chair votes aye, motion carries. All right, let's come back to the top of the agenda, the employee clinic. Since I feel like we probably cover that in the next 10 minutes. So Mr. Jacobs, can you take the reins? And if you got anything to share or present, go for it.
Okay, happy to do it, commissioners, and we'll jump right into it, given the time, and I'll go on and share my screen. Okay, just for background and context, particularly I would say Commissioner Rader, who's been on this committee perhaps since its inception, knows that we have used every tool in the toolbox to try to mitigate healthcare costs. That includes our plans around cost sharing, our plans around and promoting wellness. We separated the risk pool between actors and retirees a couple of years ago. And in addition to the administration helping us out as a budget resource, it's using all of these tools, we've been able to keep employee contributions flat for 6 out of 7 years, and that's nearly unheard of. My wife happens to work for a large organization, and every year that she gets her open enrollment notice, it starts off with the very first line, your rates are going up. And that has not been the case for DeKalb County. And I think it's because we're paying attention to details. Now that we've used almost every arrow in the quiver, we're looking at new ways to mitigate cost while promoting a positive employee experience. And so the next item that we want to look at is on-site, or in our case, near-site clinics. So before the pandemic, I got a chance to visit some clinics, the city of Atlanta, city of Chattanooga, and also Henry County. And one of the main takeaways that I got from those visits is that it's something that employees really value, something that they enjoy, and it's something that those employers say is a real value add to their benefits program. It would help certainly in retaining and perhaps even attracting quality employees. And so to that end, we asked our friends at Buck to do a feasibility study back in 2019. And of course, shortly after that, the pandemic hit. And so during that time, we've continued looking for a location for an on-site employee clinic. That was very challenging in that DeKalb is unique in that our employees are dispersed over a very wide geographic area. Unlike City of Atlanta or Cobb County or Gwinnett County, where most of their employees are under one big roof, ours are all over the place. So finding the right location was a tremendous challenge, but we do think we have a solution in today's presentation that would make access readily available to nearly all of our employees. And then, of course, we had some logistics issues when we tried to locate a clinic in the Maloof building. We had logistics issues in the Sam Street location, as well as other areas that we considered. So we'll take the next 10 minutes to look at some of the pros and cons of this feasibility study. And I will, without further delay, hand it over to, I think Brett is going to present on behalf of Buck.
All right. You guys hear me?
We hear you.
Perfect. Fantastic. Okay. So we'll hit this executive summary pretty quickly. As Mr. Jacobs just stated, we've done a lot of evaluation around this health center, our health clinic, since the 2019. Evaluated many factors, centralized accessible location, the improved trust of your members, cost effectiveness, functionality, the scope of the services offered, what type of services would be offered through the clinic, who's eligible to receive those services at the clinic, as well as who would administer the clinic. And so, as you can see in the bullets here, there's a lot of things to consider around offering a clinic, standing up a clinic. This is an employer sponsored, right? So a county sponsored health clinic. We'll run through the bullets here. The lower healthcare costs and increased employee satisfaction. Benefit improvement. So the goal would be to offer services at a $0 copay for your members in the Anthem POS and HMO plans. When it comes to the HSA membership, because of the legality around HSAs and being first dollar coverage from the member's responsibility, there would have to be a copay charge to those members, but the copay being anywhere from $25 to $30 versus call it a retail, price point for them to go to see their PCP, which could run, $75 to $125 for a sick visit. So significant benefit improvement and out-of-pocket costs for your members at the clinic. Ease of access to care for your employees and as well as the membership. Help with navigating referrals to lower cost and higher quality providers. Improve trust, the compliance and health outcomes. Establishing a well-being or wellness hub. So using your clinic as kind of a hub for all things health and wellness and well-being related activities. A lower startup cost. The administrator Everside has agreed as part of the RFP that we finished up a couple years ago to provide all the furnishings, the equipment, the build out, the signage, the security system, the design, and any other expenses in order to open up the door of that clinic for your membership, as well as having access to Everside's network of clinics within the region. So even outside of DeKalb, should someone need to go to a clinic, they would have the ability to go to another Everside clinic should that be necessary. And as part of the cost of the clinic, the last bullet there, the projected ROI. So I know this is something you guys are going to be pretty aware of and interested in. And basically being able to reroute services outside of the network, but into a clinic where those services are completed at a much lower price point. The projection on that is anywhere from almost 2 to 2.5 to 1 over a 5-year period. And the reason there's a range there, one, because it's really hard to tie it down to a specific number, but two, we've got a couple different financial options to look at, right? So one being for employees only, and one being for employees plus their dependents and their members. So still a little bit more to come on future slides. Any questions here before we move on?
Any questions? Okay, go ahead, Rick.
Okay, all right. There we go. So we got 2 cost proposals here. Again, option 1 would be a staffing model for employees only. So that second bullet there. And this staffing model includes 1 advanced practitioner and 1 medical assistant. There is some estimated pass-through cost of anywhere between, call it $50,000 and $100,000 per year, which includes stuff like pharmacy, which would be like maintenance medications, or someone comes in and has, the flu and they need some antibiotics or something to that nature, labs and any supplies. COVID-19 management, so the testing could be conducted at the clinic, vaccines can be done at the clinic, and any other additional pass-through expenses that may come up that, let's say that the county wants to go through and do wellness event and do a biometric screenings for everyone in order to offer some sort of reduction or gift card or something to that nature. That can all be set up and then costs just pass through. Again, no build out costs, no lease payments, no furnishings, no equipment, all of that being handled by the administrator, Everside. And under this proposal, the annual health center cost would be an estimate of about $650,000 with a 5-year ROI range of anywhere between 2 and 2.5 to 1. And that ROI is based on a 40% employee participation rate, which we think is relatively reasonable. It's going to take a little time to get your members in the know, to build that trust, to get them to go to the clinic by offering the $0 copay. We do think that it certainly incentivizes people to want to go to the clinic and to have just quicker access to that care. And over time, word of mouth, it spreads and more people continue to come. Option 2 is essentially all of the same items here from the first one we just went through, but it includes a model where you would be including families and the pre-65 retirees. So any dependents, children above the age of 2, and their spouses or anyone else covered on the health plan for both employees and the pre-65 retirees. We would not be including the Medicare eligible post-65 retirees in this clinic. And pass-through costs are obviously increased here because you just have more people. The staffing model includes 2 of the advanced practice providers as well as 2 of the medical assistants to be able to handle more people. Again, no build-out costs. Everything still is the same, but then the health center cost on per year does increase because you've just got a lot more people coming through at about a $1.1 million over the 5-year period. With up to about a 2-to-1 ROI. And that would include about an 80%, or is based on an 80% employee participation rate. So that's a lot of information there. So any particular questions on this one?
Yes, Commissioner Rader.
What's your break-even participation rate?
Oh, gosh. Of course, you're going to ask me a question I can't answer.
Well, I mean, just ballpark it. I mean, if we got 20% of the people to participate in it, would it pay for itself?
20%, probably so. 20%, I mean, I have to imagine we're going to be above 20% participation rate.
I know, but I'm just trying to figure out where we're, going to be ended up spending money and saving money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Commissioner, of course, this was 2019 when we did the feasibility study, but at the time, the projection was that after 2 full years, the facility we would break even on cost. So I don't remember what the number of feet going through the door would be, but it was projected by year 3 that the clinic would be self-sustained.
Could you just find out what that number was? Because it should be embedded in your break-even analysis.
Okay. Yep. I will find that out.
Yeah. I mean, that's my main question. I want to make sure that if we make this investment, that we're actually going to realize the savings that are projected out of it. And in order to do that, you've got to have a sufficient number of employees that are using the resource. Otherwise, it's a stranded investment. So I think that it's, a reasonable and attractive option for employees, but, they've got to show up. And so that's what I want to make sure of, is that there's enough, cushion in that so that we can easily recover our costs through participation.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Jacobs.
So I think, if I remember correctly, Brett, there may be about 2,500 employees in the Anthem plan. And so with the estimate that if 40% used the clinic, that would be our break-even point?
No, this is just saying that the savings are based on a 40% participation rate in year 1. So
Right, and you said that it
the-
was a 3-to-1 or something like that, 1.5-to-1 or 2-to-1, something like that, didn't you say?
Yeah, for the employee only model here on the left, it's a 2 to 2.5 to 1.
Yeah, so that's for every dollar we spend, we'll get $2.50 worth of saved cost, right?
Right.
So I would expect it be, Brett, somewhere around 20%, like Commissioner Rader mentioned earlier, just because
Correct.
we would be at about 1-to-1 with half of the 40%. So it should be, in that 20% or less range. But we'll get that confirmed.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah, those are good things to know. And I'm just curious, sort of, there was option 1 and 2. Are there other services that could be provided at these clinics? And I'm specifically thinking about nutrition services or other kind of preventative sort of focused type, things.
Absolutely. Yes, actually. And Larry, if you could go ahead to right here.
And we might have
here is a
to,
list.
let's at 3:40, we're going to have to do a hard stop so we can get the PWI, but we'll keep talking about this in 2 weeks. So we just keep going and then hard stop 3:40.
Okay.
Okay, so this is just a sample. This is not necessarily everything, but this is the common types of services that are offered at other employer-sponsored health clinics, right? So primary care, preventive care, urgent care, telehealth, occupational health, lab services, pharmacy. And when we say pharmacy, we're talking about, more maintenance type of scripts. PT, mental health services, immunization and testing. So yes, I mean, there is a lot that can be built out within the clinic, nutrition services. We could, and again, using this as a wellness hub, that is kind of, one of the big draws to the health center is really focusing your entire membership to think about using that health center before going to another provider within the network, within the Anthem network, for instance. This is not a replacement of a PCP, a primary care physician. This is not intended to replace that service, your relationships there. But it certainly is a place for folks to go when they need something quickly, when they, got to make an appointment a month out from their PCP, but they need something sooner. Being able to drive down the street in a centralized location within the county, get a service and go back to work, right? So productivity increases. Your cost decrease. So there's a lot of factors here that really are in that pro column, but again, not at all an intent to replace any existing PCP or specialist relationships that exist today. But we can build this out however you want, right? And whatever we do in day one and open up the doors and these are the services we offer, that does not have to be the only services we offer on a go-forward basis. This can be an evolving clinic that, just continues to, have services added based on the needs and wants of your members and the building of your entire wellness and well-being program.
Okay, good. So I guess, can we have just let's send around this presentation to all the committee members and commissioners, and let's ask that question of what additional type things you think are really important, or maybe option 1 and 2 is enough, and we'll just start there. So let's do that. And then did y'all have anything to say about location, or are you still looking into that?
Commissioner, we have identified a location on Wynn Way, which is just a block over from Emory, what's now Emory University Hospital in Decatur. We did a heat map that shows it's easily and readily accessible to nearly all of our employees, whether they're at Maloof, Sam Street, or even as far away as Tucker, or even some of the sanitation facilities on the north lot, fairly easy to get to.
Okay. All right. And so that location is pretty much primed, ready to go. It's just a matter of what option we pick.
That's correct. And I would mention, commissioners, that we did put a request in the mid-year budget for option 1, which is for employees only. Everside, who's the company that won the bid to manage the clinic, quoted $650,000 on an annual basis. So we put $325,000 in the mid-year budget request, and then gives us some time to evaluate the success of the clinic. Then we'd come back to you in the fall for 2023's budget request and ask to fund option 2, which is the option that includes employees plus dependents.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks for that context. And can you send around the little heat map that you were referenced to for the location?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's in the presentation. Yep.
It is.
It's on
Okay.
one of the future slides there that shows kind of where your folks are located, and then it shows a little pinpoint of the clinic on Wynway.
Gotcha. Okay. So we finish the presentation in 2 weeks. Are y'all looking for some sort of kind of preference, or does, I mean, you know, of CO Williams, if you're already sort of thinking option 1, or you're looking for us to give you a little bit more and then that influences the mid-year budget requests? CO Williams or Mr. Jacobs?
Well, we had a very brief conversation with COO Williams earlier and provided a recommendation for option 1, and that option is in the mid-year budget request.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Okay. So maybe just last thing as a parting thought here. So if commissioners come back and they say, oh, there's other options, other things we want, I guess the big question is does the current location and this current site analysis allow for expansion of services, or is option 1, option 2 really all they can fit in, I guess, that box you're looking at? So
yeah,
let's come back to that as well. Okay, good. All right. Commissioners, anything else before we adjourn the meeting? Okay, seeing nothing else. Yes, CO Williams.
Commissioner, we will circulate the public safety presentation. And maybe next time we'll lead with that, if possible.
Yeah, that'll be great. We'll lead with convenience store surveillance and then public safety.
And right after that, do public safety. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Sorry to go a little bit late, or kind of like a lot late, Chair Cochran Johnson. But we'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All right, see a second. All in favor? Raise your hands. Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you all very much.